In this video, I'm going to show you how to determine whether two statements are logically equivalent to each other, negations of each other, or neither, using truth tables. So I'm going to give you two statements. In this first one, we're going to do if not Q, then P as one of our statements, and if not P, then Q as our other statement. Okay. Now, rather than building two separate truth tables, we can kind of put this all in one big truth table just to save us some time and energy. As you can see, both of our statements only have P's and Q's, so they're only made up of two simple statements. So we know when we go to build our truth table that there will be four possibilities for the truth values for P and Q. True, 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 false, false, true, and false, false. All right, I'm just going to work on my first statement first. I see that I need a not Q. Okay, so let me go ahead and build a column for not Q. Not Q is the negation of Q, so we'll just change the truth values from the Q column to get false, true, false, true. That is all I'll need for that one. If I want to, I can go ahead and build that column for this statement. So if not Q, then P. All right, now this is a conditional. And when we have a conditional, the order matters. And so we're looking at this column and we're looking at this column. But we have to make sure we're looking at this one first and then this one. And the reason is because a conditional is only false when the first one is true and the second one is false. So it's very important that you know which one was first and which one's second. So I'm looking at it in this order, false, true. I'm looking for a true, false situation. Not here, not here, not here, but here's one. True, then false makes a conditional false. All the other times it will be true. Okay, so that is, we'll make this one our orange statement. So we know we're going to be looking at that column as one of our answer columns. Okay, now let's work on the second statement. We can just keep adding on to this truth table. I'm going to need a not P column where I'm going to negate the P's. So that's going to be false, false, true, true. And then I'm going to build this conditional statement. If not P, then Q. Again, the order is very important here. All right, we'll make this one purple. This is going to be what we look at first, and this is going to be second, because it's if not P, then Q. All right, to build this, which is this. Okay. So, again, it's a conditional. The only time a conditional is false is when the first one's true and the second one's false. Let's see if we have any of those possibilities. False, true, no, false, false, true, true. Here's one right here. True, then false. True, then false is going to be false. All the others will be true. All right, so we know that this column here and this column are our two statements that we were looking for. So we're comparing those two columns, okay? So what do you see about those two columns? They both are true, 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 false. So they have the exact same truth values in the same order. Since those are identical, then the statements are logically equivalent. So if those columns are exactly the same, then the two statements are logically equivalent to each other. Okay, let's try another one. All right, here, my first statement's going to be, it is false that P or Q. And my second statement's going to be, it is false that not P and not Q. Okay. Again, since we only have P's and Q's, we can make one truth table to kind of cover everything. Let's go ahead and get it started with the same 4 possibilities for P and Q. True, 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 false, false, true, false, false. All right, I'm going to work on my first statement first. I'm going to start inside the parentheses. I have P or Q. All right, an or statement or a disjunction is true as long as at least one part is true. So that's going to be true, that's going to be true, that's going to be true. The only one that'll be false is this one. And then we want to negate that statement. So we just take the column we just did and we negate it. And so that's going to be false, 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 true. All right, so that is, I'll let that be my orange. That's this one. That's one of my answer columns. All right, now let's work on our second statement. We're going to need a not P column. I can already see we're going to need a not Q column, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw both of those. All right, so not P negates our P, so that'll be false, false, true, true. Not Q negates our Q column, so that'll be false, true, false, true. All right, we're going to join those with an and. I better write small. All right, so we have not P and not Q. We're joining these two together with an and. Conjunction is only true when they're both true. So right here I see both true, so that's the only time a conjunction comes out true. These will be false. And then I have to negate that. See if I can squeeze it in here. Okay, so I'm negating this column. So I'm going to change those truth values, true, 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 false. All right, let's let that one be purple. So here's purple. And so we're looking at these two columns and comparing them to determine whether these statements are logically equivalent. To be logically equivalent, they have to be exactly the same, which they are not. The next option is, are they negations of each other? So if they have opposite truth values in every situation, they will be negations of each other. So look here, we have false, true. Those are opposites, false, true, opposites, false, true, and true, false. So these are exact opposites, which means these two statements are negations of each other. All right, now let's do one more. I'm going to need another piece of paper because in this one I'm going to include some R's, a third simple statement in our compound statements. So my two statements I'm looking at this time are, if P or Q, then R. That's my first statement. My second statement is, if not R, then it is false that P or Q. All right, so when I see that I have P's, Q's, and R's, then I know that I'm going to have 8 possibilities in my truth table for my truth values for P, Q, and R. So just to remind you how I fill this in my P column, I start with 4 trues and 4 falses. Then I come back up in Q and R columns and I do my 4 scenarios that I do when I only have 2 simple statements. So I do true, 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 false, false, true, false, false. Then I repeat that true, 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 false, false, true, false, false. And that will give you all 8 possibilities. So you don't have to sit there and think about what they would be. All right, now I am going to start with my first statement. I need a P or Q column. All right, P or Q, that's a disjunction, and or is true as long as at least one part is true. So we're looking at P and Q, and as long as you see a true, it's going to come out true. All of those, this one, this one. All right, the only 2 that are going to come out false are these last 2. All right, and now I want to join that with R. So I'm going to have if P or Q, then R. A conditional statement. Now on conditionals, we have to look at the order. It does matter. We're looking at this column first, and the R as our second column. All right, because in a conditional, it only comes out false if the first one's true and the second one's false. So I'm going to go through and look for any scenarios where that happens. All right, we have true, true, not there. All right, true, false, there's one. True, false is going to come out false. Here's another one. True, false is going to come out false. There's one more. True, false is going to come out false. All right, then I just go back, because I know that's the only time it will be false. I just go back and fill in the rest with trues. All right, so that's our answer column for our first statement. We're done with that one. Now we need to work on our second statement. In our second statement, I'm going to need a not R column. So I'm going to come back to R, and I'm going to negate those. So R is true, false, it just alternates. So I'm going to start with false, and it'll be false, true, false, true. Oh shoot, I'm going to make sure they're lined up. False, true, false, true. Okay. I already have built P or Q, it's right there. No need to build it again. So I can go ahead and jump to its negation. So I'm looking at this column. Just make sure you're looking at the right one to negate it. So that's going to be false, 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 true, true. Okay. And last, I'm going to join these together. So I'm going to have if not R, then the negation of P or Q. Okay, this is a conditional. Order does matter. We're going to be looking at this one first and this one second. To build the purple, which is this one. Okay, and so it's a conditional, which is only false when it's true then false. So I'm going to go down and look for true then false. True then false, that one's going to be false. True then false, that one's going to be false. True then false, that one's going to be false. And that's all. So I know I can go back and fill in the rest with trues. Now I am looking here and here. Ooh, sorry. And I want to compare these truth values. And as you go down the line, you can see that they are exactly the same. And since they have the exact same truth values, those two statements are logically equivalent.